broadcasting live from the Expo show floor here in Louisville, Kentucky. My honored guest is Walter Charnizon, president at TechDay HQ. And thank you for being here, Walter.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for asking me to be here.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about TechDay?
Sure. TechDay is a platform for early stage technology startup companies. They are the young entrepreneurs that are building innovative solutions and products for many markets. Most of them are at the very earliest stages of their growth. Those are our exhibitors.
Yeah.
The audience that assembles to meet them are venture capitalists looking to invest in companies like that, talent looking to go to work for companies like that, corporates looking to partner with or utilize or maybe even acquire companies like that,
Yeah.
the press, the general public, people who just like to see what's coming around the corner, and really cool things emerge. They're mostly diamonds in the rough. A lot of things
Yeah.
aren't going to make it in that kind of space. It's sort of like Shark Tank on steroids.
Yeah.
And in fact, Shark Tank uses us as their East Coast casting call.
Really?
So entrepreneurs, it's an entrepreneur magnet, and a magnet for people who want to be with entrepreneurs and innovators.
I'm sure that the tech entrepreneurs love you for doing this, and they're giving them a platform.
One can hope
Yeah.
that there's some love there, but it is, if nothing else, it is there is a community that understands that there are people who are trying to expedite it for them.
Yeah.
They're young, so they don't have necessarily trade show experience. They don't
Right.
think of what I do as a trade show, actually.
Right.
And every time I try to use the language of a trade show professional with them, their eyes glass over their head. But at the end of the day, what's sort of cool about it in the context of this room that we're sitting in is it is a trade show.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't call it that.
Right.
They would call it a demo day. They would call it a
Activation.
something else. But at the end of the day, the bringing together of a community and trying to facilitate dialogue and commerce and relationships, that's what a trade show is, and that's what that is. So it's an interesting thing. I have to pull back the reins on my trade show vocabulary when I talk to them, because it just doesn't work the same way.
Yeah, exactly. And then same thing in the other way is when they want to start talking about coding and so.
Yes, 100%. Because that's, as a matter of fact, that's the worst part of doing this, is they think I know something about tech. And so a little bit.
Yeah, you're like I understand the jargon, but I'm not.
No, I
I'm not
can't even
part
say
of
I
it.
understand the jargon. I can pronounce the jargon.
There
It's about
you
as
go.
good as I can get.
So what is how did you end up in this industry? Like, what's your origin story?
My origin story is, it goes back 35 years or so. So I was a liberal arts college kid. My dad was a part of a company way back when called Clapp and Poliak. And Clapp and Poliak was one of the leading trade show organizers in the country. They were one of the sort of founding father institutions of the business.
Wow.
Saul Poliak, who was the founder of that, was responsible for things like the heavy industrial events in Chicago, things that brought together the mayor would come to the show management office to talk about next year's not hardware show, but plant engineering show. Things that are no longer necessarily things we think of as an industry here in our world. And Clapp and Poliak had a long history of producing events. My dad had been a journalist, a trade journalist, and ended up in that space writing for him and working there. And Clapp and Poliak got bought by Connors, which later became Reed. And in that moment, I think my dad sort of had to make a choice about being a little fish in a big pond or a big fish in a little pond, and sort of rolled dice and launched a business producing events. And that was back in 85, I think. And I was just out of college and had no desire to go work with family. I mean, I hated anybody who said they were in the family business, because I thought it was the laziest way of doing anything.
Right.
And in 1986, when he was producing his first event. We were the second industrial event at the Javits Center.
Wow.
Light Fair, I think they were Light Fair back then. Anyway, Light Fair, then us. And it was a hyper busy moment. This was, an early stage company, and they didn't have enough hands on deck. And he sort of said, listen, let me pay a couple of bucks an hour, come in, open the mail, answer the phones, just be an errand boy for a couple of minutes. That's all I need. And I reluctantly said yes, and started about 2 months before that show. And I went from seeing anxiety and hustle in that office to thousands of people walking in a room, and the excitement and thrill that came with that. And then it all went away.
Yeah.
Crumpled up the yellow legal pad, started up again. And I thought it was just the most extraordinary thing to tap into that energy and that excitement of people coming together, of just things happening that were born out of an idea. You know, nothing gets manufactured at a trade show. It all gets assembled because you've understood a marketplace and understood their needs and brought it together. And that I found pretty interesting and pretty exciting. And although I didn't want to, right, I just got sucked in deeper and deeper. Deeper and deeper until I gave into the dark side, Luke. And I spent about 15 years working with him, did everything from answering the phones to running the events. I mean, within a short order of time, I was producing the events and the portfolio, and eventually exited from that. He sold to Prime Media back in those days, Intertech, Prime Media, whatever that was, and Penn now. And we have one little piece left over that didn't go with the sale that I then bought from him in ergonomics marketplace. It was about workplace health and safety, and produced that on my own for about 15 years. You know, built a staff, built a company, built the events into something, and then exited from that about 10 years ago. And I then went to work for the guys who bought me. It was a wonderful company, LRP, out of Southern Florida. Worked for them for a couple of years, and then decided it was a good idea to try to figure something else out, and that sort of entrepreneurial bug just didn't let go, and did some work outside the industry for a little while, mostly in political campaign work. And it really reminded me of what we do. You know, it was about organizing, leading, getting a message out, and getting people to follow that message. And I just came back. And I found this TechDay event. A buddy of mine, it was launched by a real technology, wizard. I mean, the guy who launched it was a true entrepreneur, a true tech, insightful guy, but not a show professional. And so for him, it was too much to just let go of, and too little to keep doing as a part-time thing. And just, it was a great marriage and a great acquisition. And so for the last couple of years, I've been working through that, working through TechDay.
That's great. And I didn't realize that we shared that second generation as well.
Is that right?
Yeah. My father did this. He was a general service contractor as well, and he started at 17 years old, kicking carpet on the show floor.
That's what I mean, right?
And then I grew up around it. My first job was, he gave me $20 to empty waste baskets, and
100%.
And
that's
then,
right.
Same thing where I was. It was one of those things I never even saw myself doing, and it was one of those, that was Dad's job, and
right.
And then I left. I went to the Marines, and then he said, when you get out and come back, why don't you come check it out? And I seeing it as a kid, being around it, you don't really recognize what's going on. But then coming back as a young man, and I looked around, and it was like, wow, like I'm always reading, studying, learning new things, and I'm kind of that jack of all trades, interested in everything, and this is like dream come true. I get to work with every industry.
Right. That's right. And if your mind and heart and personality are open that way, how can we, it's like a kid in a candy store. Because if there are 1,000 people here, there are 1,000 different markets represented. And it's funny, a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, a young woman who was working for me, who was really great and who knew tech and knew TechDay, I brought her with me to, I think it was IAEE when it was in New Orleans maybe. And as we were walking around, bumping into people who were with the helicopter show and with the floor covering show and with the stonemason show and everything, you could see her eyes get opened to the fact that everything can be a market. Everything can be an interesting... It just, if you give yourself over to understanding that everybody is doing something in common, and then something uniquely specific to their market and to themselves. It's really sort of, it's extraordinary.
Absolutely.
And to your point about the difference between seeing it as a kid and seeing it as a grown up, is the difference. I mean, I don't know what it was like for you, but if you said to your buddies that your family was involved in trade shows,
Yeah.
all they thought about was like, I don't know, water buffalo hats on the
Yeah.
honeymooners or something, and it made no sense. It was
Right.
conventions. It didn't make
It
this.
was like, oh, like the auto show. And
Right,
that's
exactly,
That's the
exactly.
only thing that people can connect to.
That's exactly right. And a later generation, it's Comic-Con. I mean,
Yep.
there's just, that's
Very
what
true.
you do.
Yep.
And once you understand that it's so much more than that, that's the shiny stuff, and that's really cool that they built those things, but there's so much more, and all of them began with a kernel,
Yep.
a nut, and that grew up into something. It's when you really step back from 3,000 feet above, which is what this conversation prompts you to
Right.
do, it's also about the economy and how many jobs are represented
Yeah.
there, and how many livelihoods are predicated on that, and the ripple effects from emptying the wastebasket to the shoe shine stand to the hotel to the restaurant to the cabs to the everything. The ripples just keep going out on the pond, and it becomes a source of growth for so many people,
Oh, yeah.
and employment and livelihood and relationships, and it's really it's thrilling when you think. For me, it's thrilling when you think about it that way. I understand that we all define thrills differently. I know but it is really, it's rewarding. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. It's rewarding that way.
Yeah, just speaking to someone else, and then she said we're battling with gaining new employees and people entering our industry because they can look at what we do and go, "Why I'm gonna get on my phone and start a business."
Yeah.
And well, that's good for you in Tech Day, but
Well,
no. But the other side of that is like getting people to even understand like that this is an industry and that is.
Well, that's my point. Getting on your phone and thinking you could start a business is actually, truthfully not great for Tech Day, because what happens is it looks so easy.
Yeah.
You watch Shark Tank and it just looks so easy. All I have to do is come in and tell you about myself and you're going to write me a check.
Right.
And so some of those entrepreneurs are so misguided.
Yeah.
And I think that there was a time when the entrepreneur was a kernel of something inside of you, and it got married up to a lot of research, a lot of homework, and a lot of carefully plotted out, sometimes, running, not knowing where the road was going.
Yeah.
Now it feels like, just start.
Yeah.
Just start.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's necessarily good,
Yeah.
because there's sometimes carelessness that comes with that.
Right, and it's glorified and looks easy when it's like someone has a bar napkin idea and Shark Tank wants to buy
That's
it.
exactly
Yeah,
right. That's exactly right.
But it's just for us, we have to find the people like you and I that get hooked, and we just got to get them in the door, And,
Well, that's part of it, but it's also, I think the culture, I think the work culture has changed a lot in my lifetime, and it used to be that a junior person would get on the phone and talk about maybe buying a booth or something at the show. Then you got promoted, and they got promoted, and you'd maybe talk about an island the next time, or you'd maybe talk about a sponsorship the next time, and you became more senior together, and the relationship built around trust that spawned was really, really significant. And I think now there's a sense of 2 years. I've been at this job for 2 years.
Yeah.
It's time for me to go. And getting young talent to want to stay in this business is really a challenge, because it takes time to nurture relationships. It takes time to understand really what the other person's needs are. And if you're selling concrete at a show, I guess you can do that, but you're missing what's valuable about this. And that takes understanding the other person's needs and thinking of yourself. I think it requires you to think of yourself as part of their business, part of their marketing arm, part of their sales arm, part of whatever it is that they need. You are, as a show organizer, you are creating, I'm maybe not describing something that is going to be as brilliant as I think it is, but you are aggregating everybody's resources to produce something bigger and better and more rewarding than they could possibly afford by themselves. So even if, in my case, Google is, Google and Amazon is Amazon, and they could all do whatever it is that they want to do. They have the resources to do anything. But because I am aggregating a market, and because I'm taking all the resources from all of the little mom and pop startups that are involved in it, I'm bringing something to them that they couldn't get unless they put in all of that work and all of those resources and focused on only that, which is really not in their best interest. It's best to let us do it, bring the community together, and step out of the way and let everybody do what they have to do. So if you think of yourself as part of their needs on both sides of that equation, and how to use the resource to make it work for them, then really exciting things can happen. And if you think of yourself as only trying to get a sale or whatever,
Selling real estate.
Yeah, and that's, so I think that's a difficult lesson to deliver to people who don't give themselves enough time to be in our business and really get what it means. What you were saying before about emptying wastebaskets or something, it can sound to some people listening to this, I guess, like wastebaskets. But those wastebaskets were I don't mean to really glorify everything, but they're filled with, the best thinking, the best whatever that somebody in that booth did for 6 months to put into a brochure, wrote it and printed it and checked the color and the counts and the shipping and everything that went with it. And it may end up in the garbage can, but what you're picking up is all of that work, all of that brain power that went into getting that. And I don't know, I really do like what we do when you really think about it as so much more than real estate and so much more than an activation and so much more.
And that's one thing that I try to explain to people, that we're part of something that is the success of a startup company, or is the success of a growing company and scaling company, and bringing them to marketplace, bringing them to a place where they can meet customers or meet partnerships. And
100%. And I guess I'll tell you that the first year that I had this show, this TechDay show, Google was one of our sponsors, and they had a booth at the show, and I was talking to the guy. They hosted our kickoff party the night before. Went great. And I'm standing at the booth with the guy from Google who was fairly high up in the hierarchy there. And somebody came up to him and said, I'm sorry to interrupt, you're with Google? My grandson got me this new phone, and I can't get my pictures on it. Can you help me? And I wanted to hide under a rock, right? Because it was not what he was there for.
Sure.
And when the guy left, I said, I'm really sorry, I don't know what to say about that. And he said, listen, the party last night, the kickoff party last night, we can't do that. Even though we're Google, you brought us a couple of hundred founders, business owners, and my team can't get warm, intimate contact with them like that in a relaxed setting, all of that.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen organically that you get a group together that way.
Yeah.
So for us, the value, this is him talking, the value is that this is, okay, I can live with this not being what I it's not one conversation that makes the event worthwhile, is what I'm saying.
Right, absolutely.
Or it poisons the event. It's the other way. It's not that one conversation can poison it. One conversation can make it. And all it takes is one,
Yeah, like I said, you meet at that social function, and then you see each other on a show floor, and you have a follow-up, and maybe you had a funny moment last night, and you relive it when you talk, and
and it could be 6 months later even.
And that's what fosters and builds the relationships.
Right. That's right. And so we've become kind of a culture that wants immediate results, and this doesn't really lend itself to that. If it's an order writing show, it's like, okay, the fall line is in, and I'll take 3 gross in yellow and 2 dozen in blue. I get that. But if you give over to building a relationship, nourishing something, really powerful things happen out of events like this.
Sure. So the next Tech Day, when does Tech Day happen?
We just had it a couple of weeks ago, actually. It's late November when we hold it, right before Thanksgiving. And this was the first time since the pandemic, like many of us, right? Yeah. This was the first time that we had reassembled the community. And, it's powerful when that happens. In fact, we had, people who had been there before the pandemic were sort of walking around going, "Ooh, what happened?
Yeah.
That's different." People who were there for the first time were going, "Oh my God, thank God this thing came along. This is fantastic. I can't believe it." So it was a couple of weeks ago. It was really strong. We ended up, about 150% of our expected attendance. And,
Yeah.
we sold out the exhibit hall. And there were all sorts of good things. But the real metric for me was I was getting thank you notes from exhibitors after the event, which who writes a thank you note to a trade show organizer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like it's not, usually you get different kinds of notes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they're short, and typically the words are 4 letters long, and that's about it. And there's something really gratifying about that because, the authenticity of somebody's experience shines through like that. So that was our Tech Day return story. The other thing that happened for us was we kind of experimented with other paradigms during the pandemic. Virtual's a mixed bag at best, I think, and has sort of proven, I think everybody agrees, that if it could have put a real dent into face-to-face, it would have. They're just separate animals. And we experimented with a lot of things, and some of them are going to stick and last, and some of them are going to go the way of the dodo, and it's an evolutionary experience, all of it. And I think that's the takeaway from the pandemic. It's easy when the world's stable year to year to say rinse and repeat, and when it's not, you have to rethink it and
figure stuff out.
right.
Yeah.
And it's unpleasant, but it's
How do people find you and find info on Tech Day?
well. TechDayHQ.com is our website, and we're happy to talk to anybody who wants to have a conversation about how to grow a business, frankly, because it's really about entrepreneurship for me and innovation and finding a way to take good ideas and democratize access to their success.
Yeah.
So TechDayHQ.com, you can find us, and hopefully we can find a way to help each other.
Well, this was great. Thank you so much for being here, Walter. I appreciate